Welcome to Kingdom Authority with James Alford, your source for insight on spiritual warfare, discernment, and the power of God. Be prepared for your eyes to be opened like never before and walk in the power of God's kingdom. Here is your host, James Alford.
Thank you so much once again for tuning in to the Kingdom Authority with James Alford podcast. I'll tell you what, I have an awesome guest today. I met him just a few months ago at the NRB conference, and I was speaking with someone about spiritual warfare, and he overheard it, and I tell you what, we began to talk, and there was definitely a kingdom connection there. And he did something that, he gave me something that really caught my attention. He handed me a couple of steaks. Steaks that you press into the ground. Yeah, I know you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with the podcast today? Well, I tell you, there's something that God has given him in them steaks that I tell you what, many people have seen blessings, and there are many testimonies of the power of God. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much of what this is all about. I'm going to let him tell you himself. But I tell you what, this podcast today is really going to bless you. So today I have on the podcast with me Steve Hemphill. How you doing today?
I'm good, Brother James. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I'm so thankful for you coming on. We met just a couple of months ago, and I know we've talked a couple of times on the phone, and every time I've spoken with you, man, I've just been blessed by what God is doing in you.
Well, you're a blessing to me, too. It was an honor to meet you at the convention, and I was sort of accidentally ended up there and then accidentally ended up in line behind you. We know there's no accidents. There's just God instances.
Absolutely.
So let me tell you what we talked about, and maybe this will bless your audience in some special way. I hope it does.
Okay.
We were talking about spiritual warfare, and I heard you say something, and so I showed you and handed you a few of my steaks. I've got some steaks with Bible verses. And I've quickly told you the story, but I'm gonna slow it down, and you can stop me and interrupt me if you have anything you want to ask about to clarify. But I want to tell you how this happened, how this came about, where we have these steaks with Bible verses on. I'm a Christian author and speaker. I used to own a business for almost 30 years. I had my own company, but I sort of accidentally became an author when my dad died in the summer of 2000, because back then there were no books on heaven. Even the Randy Alcorn book didn't come out until 2005. So when Dad died, he was a very godly man and had led many to Christ, and was a businessman too. And he left a sealed envelope in the safe addressed to me and my brother. And on the outside, he'd written on this sealed envelope our names, and then it said, "If you boys find this after I'm dead, do not open this envelope. It is not important. Destroy this envelope without opening it. Dad." And I won't spend too much time on that right now because we want to talk about spiritual warfare, but that led to a book on heaven. I spent 7 years researching what the Bible said about heaven, and got talked into writing a book. And as soon as I submitted it to a publisher, I immediately had a book contract, and so I started speaking all over the country about heaven and just walked away from the business. I had 36 employees. We were doing $6 million a year, and I just walked away from it because it became obvious God wanted me doing this instead of that.
Wow.
So I was working on my second book called My Search for Prayers Satan Hates. And my intention was to put some prayer success stories in that book from all my years as a Christian businessman and all the times that we had problems that we had to pray. God would come through with great answers and solutions. And so I just wanted to honor God by telling the story of how he delivered us through so many things. But I prayed a strange prayer. Don't know what made me pray it, except it was the Holy Spirit, I guess. But I prayed, "Lord, please give me something special to put in this book that truly helps people." That was my heart's desire.
Yes.
I didn't want to write another book to make money. I wanted to write a book to make a difference.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So after I prayed that prayer, a couple of days, a friend of mine, a Christian friend of mine, called me and said, "Steve, is it true your next book is on spiritual warfare?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "I have a buddy I've been trying to bring to Christ for 25 years. He's a very good friend and a great guy, but he's been mad at God about some things that happened long ago, and he can't get past it. But right now, he has a spiritual warfare problem. And I'm thinking this might be our chance to convert him. Would you be willing to talk to him if I set up a meeting?" And I said, "Sure. I don't know if I can help him or not, but I'll talk." so I go meet Bill, and we're just standing there talking face to face. And I said, Bill, what's your spiritual warfare problem? And he looks at me dead serious and says, Steve, I have demons on my property. And I was thinking, they called the wrong guy. I don't have any experience. I don't know how to help. I've never heard of that. I don't know if he's hallucinating, if they're real, but the Bible talks about real demons. So I'm just kind of at a loss of what to say. But then before I can even respond to that, he says, and I'm getting ready to commit suicide. I just wanted to talk to you first.
Wow.
And immediately I realized how serious this was. And so I just started praying, Lord, tell me what to say. He's not a Christian, and he's talking about suicide. How can I help? Tell me what to say. And so as he's talking and telling me all the reasons why he's sure he has demons on his property, I'm praying, Lord, give me the right words. And a verse popped in my head that I couldn't have quoted if you'd have paid me. And all of a sudden, I could see it clear as day. And this is one from Deuteronomy 6. I think it's verses 8 through 10, something like that. And it says, you're living in a land full of evil. So be sure and put my word on your gates and doorposts. And the Jews took that literally, of course.
Right.
It's called a mezuzah, and they still do that.
Yes.
And, it's not a magic box. It's a symbol of their covenant with God and their relationship with God. And so for a second, I kind of went, how does that help? How do I apply that in my modern world? And then it kind of clicked, and I knew what to say. And so I said, Bill, don't kill yourself yet. Let's try something bizarre.
You told him to hold on for a second, right? Let God do something.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I said. He's just staring at me. I said, don't kill yourself yet. The Bible's full of bizarre stories. Let's do something bizarre. There was talking snakes and walking on water and resurrections and virgin birth. Let's just take some tent stakes and put Bible verses on them and put them in the ground, all the way in the ground on the four corners of your property, and read the verses together out loud and pray for God to make this stop.
Right.
And see what God does. And he kind of stared at me for a minute, and then he smiled and said, Steve, I'm willing to try anything. So we did. And it's too long a story to tell you right now, but let me tell you, everything changed. He said the atmosphere changed. I can tell you his attitude changed because he became a Christian and was baptized the next week.
Wow. So let me get this straight. You were a Christian, but you weren't well versed in the arena of spiritual warfare. And
not well versed. I didn't know anything about it.
Okay, and so you had no information about spiritual warfare. Here comes a guy who's at the point of suicide, literally about to kill himself, and saying that demons are interacting with him.
Yes.
And the Lord begins to instruct you on the spot about how to help him.
That's exactly what happened.
Wow. And so tell me some more.
Well, of course, first of all, I want you to know right now, I was raised ultra conservative, and I'm sort of the last guy you should be hearing miracle stories from. so you need to have that perspective as you hear what began to happen.
Right.
So he became a Christian, and honestly, because of my conservative background, I'm actually thinking, how do I write this story without looking weird to my friends? That was my concern. And so as I started to do that, my wife, who's a teacher, she was in the kitchen cooking one evening, and the phone rang, and she answered the phone in there, and it was a lady she knows from teaching. And this lady goes, Mary Lynn, is it true that Steve's next book is on spiritual warfare? She said, yes. Why? And the lady said, then I've got to talk to him right now. Can I please come over right this minute? I need help. Mary Lynn said, well, sure, come on over. This lady had also raised very conservative. She had just been on a mission trip 6 weeks before overseas. And for the first time in her life, she's having terrifying demonic dreams every night at 3 a.m. on the clock, waking her up in a cold sweat. Now, when she started talking about demonic dreams, I just paused. I said, ma'am, describe that for me, because I never heard of that.
Right.
So God's educating me. So she started describing it, and I later found a Bible verse that was almost word for word what she was saying. It's in Job 4, verses 13 to 17. In the NLT, it says, it came to me in a disturbing vision at night when people are in deep sleep. Fear gripped me and my bones trembled. A spirit swept past my face and my hair stood on end. That's Job 4, 13 to 17. And that's what this lady Victoria was describing.
Wow.
And she said, what do I do? And I said, Victoria, I'm not an expert. So,
Talk about on the job training.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
You know, and a very unlikely person, but I'm just trying to help people, and I had prayed, give me something to help people. You know?
Yes.
And so I told her, I said, I don't know how to help you for sure, but I know this. Bill was going to commit suicide, and we put Bible verses on tent stakes and staked out his place, and it stopped, and he became a Christian. And so she said, okay, then I'm going to do that. And she's just ready to try anything. She was scared to go to sleep at this point, and hadn't told anybody but me for fear that they think she's crazy.
Right. So not only is God delivering people with these stakes, but He's literally changing their faith and bringing them even closer to Him.
Yes, and training me at the same time.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
3 birds with 1 stone kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So she just went to Army Navy and bought some tent stakes and wrote verses all over them. And because she lived in an apartment and thought she might move, she just stood them in the 4 corners, the outermost corners of her apartment, and simply read the verses out loud and asked God to make it stop and to make that a safe place for her from now on. That anything evil there causing that will be bound in Jesus' name. And kind of what I talked to her about. So immediately that night they stopped. No more.
Wow.
No more.
Wow.
And so at this point she waited 2 or 3 days and then went and told her best friend at school all about it. Well, the best friend was the principal. Next thing I know, they're calling me asking me to stake out this public school. And
wow.
I said, okay. I said, can we do it at night when nobody sees us so we don't have a lawsuit? You know, over this. And they said, sure. So one night, we didn't tell anybody we were doing it. We went up there with a key to the front gate, a flashlight, 4 stakes, and a sledgehammer. And we simply got in one car and went to all 4 corners of the property. Of course, the school is a big piece of property. And we put the stake all the way in the ground. Nobody can see it. It's between us and God. We know it, and God knows, but nobody else. You know? And we prayed at every corner for the children, the parents, the teachers, their families, administrators, and delivery people. We asked God to put that wall of protection around it, and everybody connected to that school in any way that they would be delivered from any problems there. And so, as we started to leave that night, and we finished, it was dark now by 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and I said, ladies, I want you to know something. Tomorrow morning, there's going to be some mad demons because they can't get in here anymore.
Wow.
You see, God's not the great I used to could. He calls himself the I am because he still does.
Wow.
And they said, well, that's good. We need it.
Wow.
9 months later, I heard from them. I had sort of forgotten about it, but 9 months later, I heard from them. And when they called, I said, hey, good to hear from you. How's the school? And they said, great. All the problems are gone. It's like a completely different campus.
Wow.
And,
wow. So God is like putting like a he's using these stakes to form like a supernatural shield against the devices of Satan.
That's exactly what happened. And he was educating me about it at the same time so I could use his ideas to help other people.
Wow. Now, I remember when we spoke, you told me that even the police department asked that you stake out the city.
Well, what happened first was I was attacked in my living room by a guy during a Bible study. He tore my house up. I don't think I told you about that.
No, you didn't tell me about that.
We were doing a Bible study on a Friday afternoon, just me and this young man thinking about suicide, and his mom asked me to talk to him. And I had 2 studies with him already, and I'd just gotten back from Wyoming on a trip to speak, and he called to come over and study again. And in the middle of the study, in my living room, just me and him, in my living room on a Friday afternoon, we were reading in Genesis, and he got angry, and he stood up, and he started throwing furniture all over through the windows and flipped the baby grand piano all by himself, tore my house up. He did $42,000 damage in 4 minutes.
Wow.
I had to call the police, and I never had called the police for anything in my life. Called the police, and they came within 4 minutes and put him in handcuffs. And by this time, he's back in his right mind. He's saying, Steve, I'm sorry. Something evil took me over, and I couldn't stop myself. Mm-hmm. And so he had pornography on his cell phone. See, I think that gives Satan a right to be in your life.
Absolutely.
So after the policeman came and put him in handcuffs, the policeman walked in my house and said, what were y'all doing in here, sir? And I said, Bible study. And he said, what? He said, I never saw a Bible study end like this. And I said, well, sir, I'm a Christian author, and I speak on spiritual warfare. Let me give you some stakes. Let me give you my book, What Are the Stakes? Uh-huh. And I didn't press charges, so he came to Christ. And then the local Ministerial Alliance heard about this because I didn't press charges. It kind of became talked about, I guess you'd say. And by the way, the guy wrote me a check for the damage, and he had no drugs in his system. He wrote me it's $48,500 check.
Wow.
It covered. We had to have new windows, and it busted the piano and new furniture because glass was everywhere. And,
wow.
Anyway, he paid for it, no problem, and the policeman became a Christian as a result of it, so that was a win-win. And then the Ministerial Alliance heard about this and said, "Would you come talk to our board about what you're doing?" Because the crime rate in Longview is the highest it's ever been. I live in Longview, Texas, northeast corner, close to Shreveport, and in 27 years in a row, crime had gone up, and it's been going up drastically lately. Murders, rapes, and robberies are the highest they had ever been. And the local leaders, preachers and mayor and community leaders were wanting to do something proactive about this crime problem. So when the Ministerial Alliance heard about this thing with the stakes, they said, "Come tell us about what you're doing." So I went to their board and talked to them about it, and they said, "Steve, we love this idea. It's so biblical. Let's stake out the whole city." So Longview is 83,000. We have 30 entrances into the city limits. And on January in 2017, it was the first time we staked out the whole city, and we prayed at every corner, at every entrance, for Jesus to be the King of Longview and for the Holy Spirit to work on the heart of every unbeliever to prepare them for the gospel.
Wow.
And crime dropped 45% in 18 months.
Wow. You said how much? 45%?
45% drop in 18 months.
That sounds impossible.
I know. It's a God thing.
Right.
It's a God thing. He looked at me, and the police chief said, because he heard about it finally, he said, "Now you did what?" And I said, "Sir, we just put these in the ground, and we're asking God to make a difference here. We're standing on the power, the literal power of His Word to change reality." And we prayed at every corner of every entrance of the city. Wow. And he said, "Well, I've been here 27 years. At that time, I think it was 25 years, police chief." And he said, "It's gone up every year till you did that. It's gone down 45% in 18 months."
Wow. Wow.
He said, "Can I give you 8 more addresses to stake out where we're having daily calls for violent crime?"
Look at God.
I said, "Yes, sir. Just hand them here." So he went to his office and he emailed them to me, and I emailed the group that had helped stake out the city. We had 80-something people show up to stake out the city, and so I guess it was the second year, 2018. We did that in November. We staked out all 8 of those 8 different city blocks, just all over town, just different areas of town, duplexes in one place, an apartment building in one place, just a residential area, and they were having daily calls for violence from gang problems in all 8 of those locations. And the police chief also put me in direct touch with the detective over gangs. And about 6 months later, I called the detective and said, "I just wondered how it was going since we staked out the 8 addresses you gave me." And he said, "Come see me." He said, when I talked to him, he said, "When you did that, it was like turning off a faucet. We hadn't had any calls in all 8 locations."
Wow. It was that you literally took back the territory for God's kingdom.
Yep. That's right. That's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And I just can't make this stuff up.
Wow. And so the strong men that were ruling over that area lost their power because it had been staked off for Christ.
That's right.
That is
now,
amazing.
That led to, let me tell you the next step. What we did, we just did this in January of this year. Actually, the first weekend in February this year. The police chief had mentioned to me when I met him that one of the problems in Longview was a high suicide attempt rate. I mean, we had over 100 suicide attempts every year in the last 3 years. And so when he brought that up, I got to thinking about that, praying one day when I do a walk in the morning and at night, just kind of think and pray. And I was walking one morning early and I was praying about that, and all of a sudden I felt like God wanted me to go to the police chief and ask him to get the addresses of those where the suicides had been, so we could stake those out and put no more suicide on the state, in addition to the other verses that are on the state. And so I felt like I should do it, but I kind of was embarrassed. I don't know the police chief very well. I'd only talked to him that one time. He doesn't. Right. I didn't know if he'd even remember me. So I sort of tried to talk myself out of going by his office. But when I got in the car, I just turned toward his office. I said, "Okay, I'm going to go try." And I said, Lord, if you want me to do this, please make it easy for me to find him. I'm not even sure where his office is. And he's got a schedule, and I'm showing up unannounced, so make it easy for me to find him and talk to him if you want me to do this. So I walked up to the police station, and just as I parked the car and put it in park, I looked up, and the police chief walked out of the building and was walking right toward me.
Wow.
So when he walked up, I said, sir, do you remember me? I'm Steve Hemphill. He said, yeah, Steve, how you doing? He remembered me. And I asked him for the addresses for the suicide thing, just to stake that out, and he said, I'll make you a map. Just give me a little time. The guy that does that's off today, but I'll get with him tomorrow. So they made the map, and that's when I realized how many there were. And he didn't realize it had been over 300 in 3 years. I think it was 319 in 3 years. So this year we staked it out again. But in addition to the verses on the sides of the stakes, there's 16 verses, we added a sticker on the front that said, no suicide. And we had a short prayer, Lord, deliver us from thoughts of suicide, and then a whole bunch of verses about coming out of depression, just Bible verses to encourage.
Wow.
And we put that on all 30 of the stakes for all 30 entrances again, and I can't wait to hear how the statistics drop on that. In fact, I meant to call him this week, but I was trying to give it at least a few more months before I.
So God is doing an absolute miracle with these stakes. I know we call it deliverance, but it is a miracle. I mean, literally, from you not even having a background in spiritual warfare, never been trained about it, and God immediately thrust you into helping an individual. From there, you go to helping a school. From there, the city. Then you begin to, it seems like God has you now surgically using these stakes to just cut off every access point that the enemy has in that area.
That's exactly what's happening. And let me tell you now, I call this the evolution of the stake. Because what happened at first, I got talked into selling the stakes because, in fact, let me back up. Remember I told you we staked out the school? I kind of left off right there.
Yes.
The guy that was causing all the problems at that school suddenly died.
Wow.
He was in his 30s and had a heart attack.
Wow.
And I want to say, I'm not happy somebody died, but when children are at risk, God seems to get serious. There's a verse that says, if you're going to lead a child astray, it'd be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and be thrown at the bottom of the sea than to do that. So God gets serious about the children. Yes. So this guy that died, and they said that his mother came to the school after the funeral and demanded to see the principal. And when the principal came out into the lobby, she started screaming and cursing, "You killed my son. This campus killed my son." And we don't know why she thought that because we didn't tell anybody. I still won't tell you what school it was. And so they had to call security to have her escorted off the property. It was that serious.
Well, I'll tell you what, you never know who's operating in witchcraft. I mean, you have the kingdom of light, but you also have the kingdom of darkness.
Amen.
And there are those who are walking around and literally operating in that kingdom, and many people don't even know.
That's right.
Wow.
So next thing you know, people started calling me between all these stories that were happening. They started calling saying, "Hey, Steve, how much are your steaks?" And I said, "I don't sell steaks. Go make your own steaks." And then the funny questions started happening. What did you make them out of? How long are they? How far apart are they? How deep are they? What color are they? What verses did you use? How many verses did you use? Do you put them all the way in the ground or part of the way in the... I was just laughing, at all these questions.
Right.
But I was sharing them on I have a weekly group of kind of prayer concerns, some guys from church that encourage each other, and I was telling them about it, laughing. And then one week, those guys turned to me and they said, "Steve, we think this is a God thing, and that maybe you should consider selling steaks. Because if it's from God, you can't stop it. And if it's not from God, you can't make it successful. This is if this works, it's about God, not about you." And so, long story short, they talked me into selling steaks. They said, "You know what? You don't have a salary anymore. You walked away from a good salary to no salary. You don't even charge to go speak and give your seminar on spiritual warfare now, and you don't charge anybody. And maybe this is God's way to help you and help them too. We think you need to sell steaks." And one of the guys had a machine that makes real durable outdoor labels, thermal labels. And he said, "If you'll pick the verses, I'll make the labels for you, and you can order some steaks and just put these stickers on them and see what happens." So they talked me into it, and the next thing you know, I'm selling a lot more steaks than books, and people are calling me every day with more stories of relationships being restored, and churches taking out their building and the givings going up, and autism seeing improvements, and bipolar. I don't know how many mental illnesses have a demonic connection, but in Scripture it sure did. So
Right.
all these things are happening, and I'm just kind of blown away. And finally, I was ordering so many steaks that the camping company that I had been buying them from called me one day.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Is this Mr. Hemphill?" I said, "Yeah, this is Steve Hemphill." They said, "We just wanted to call and tell you, I know you just ordered 700 more steaks. We don't have any more. We're going to cancel that order. Would you please buy them somewhere else?"
Wow.
And so
Look at the
a
devil.
couple of days later, I get a call from Jacksonville, Texas, which I don't know anybody there, but it's only an hour from where I live, so I know I've heard of it, you know. And this guy goes, "Hello, is this Steve Hemphill?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you the guy putting Bible verses onto tent stakes?" And I said, "Yes, that's me." He said, "Well, I'm a plastics manufacturer, and we make the cups for the Dallas Cowboys games. We'd like to make the stakes for you." And you know, if you look on the cups from the Cowboys games, on the bottom of the cups, they have words that's built into the plastic. We do that by making a mold that has engraving in it, so the words are part of the mold, and that way when the plastic item pops out of the mold, you know, it'll already be permanent. He said we could have a steak mold built, and you wouldn't have to put stickers on these anymore. It would just be part of the plastic, all 16 verses on every steak. And I said, "Wow, that would be cool. How would this work?" And he said, "Well, you have to go buy the mold and then bring it to us. We just make plastic stuff. We don't do the mold." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'm in ministry now, and you know, my salary is actually 0.00.
Right.
So how much is a mold?" And he said, "They're about $10,000. And I kind of caught my breath, and I said, "Wow, well, thank you a lot for calling. Have a nice day." And he said, wait, don't hang up. You're buying 700 of these at a time. What are you doing with all these steaks?" So I started telling him stories. And after 4 or 5 stories, he stopped me. He said, "Stop, never mind. I'll pay for the mold."
Wow.
And I said, "Sir, you don't even know me." He said, "Well, I know God, and this is a God thing, and I want to be part of it."
Wow.
So he paid the $10,000 for the. Well, and so far I've ordered 67,000 steaks, and we've shipped them literally all over the world: China, Africa, South America, all over the United States. We staked out the White House before the last election, prayed about abortion. We staked out the Supreme Court before the Kavanaugh hearing, praying about abortion again. I can't explain this except to tell you God's word is still powerful.
Wow. Wow. An amazing, amazing story. I tell you what. Now you actually have wrote a book explaining all this, right?
Well, yes, I actually have 4 books now. 3 of them are on spiritual warfare.
Okay.
I told you I wrote a book on heaven, My Search for the Real Heaven, and then I told you I started one called My Search for Prayer Satan Hates.
Yes.
And the story of Bill's first event was in that book. But then there were so many stories happening, I came out with a next book that's called What Are the Stakes?
Yes.
What Are the Stakes?
Okay.
And so
Awesome. Well, tell the people out there, and I tell you, this is so many testimonies. I tell you, when God is moving, there's always an abundance of testimonies. You don't have to go around and try to figure out what happened last year one time around the corner. I mean, literally, there's an overflow of blessings, of testimonies of God's power moving. So I definitely know what you're saying. This is definitely a God thing. Now, can you tell the people how they can get in touch with you?
yeah, first of all, I want to tell you about my free stuff first. I've got a digital website now that has digital stuff. In fact, there's a little document that's 2 pages called How to Stake Your Property. It's all free. It's at Gumroad, which is Gumroad, just gumroad.com/Steve Hemphill Today. Steve Hemphill Today is my normal website, SteveHemphillToday.com. And I have a whole store there. Of course, Amazon has my books, and the steaks are called Spiritual Warfare Steaks. They're on Amazon too. And then I've got them on my website, Steve Hemphill Today. But I have lots of free stuff at the Gumroad.com/Steve Hemphill Today account, and then lots of things I ship every day: books and steaks and stickers for the steaks about suicide and self-discipline, and steaks praying for our children. Just different stickers you can put on them, and I'm adding new stickers all the time. And then I have audios and videos. I do a seminar called Demons versus Prayer, and I've done it all over in 300 cities in 23 states and 3 countries so far. And it's been, when I started to record that, a Hollywood movie director offered to fly out here and direct it, no charge. I didn't even know the guy. He was on my YouTube channel. I also have a YouTube channel with 150 or 160 videos of these stories. It's just called the Spiritual Warfare Channel, or Steve Hemphill, and you can learn more about it there.
Awesome. Awesome. So how can the people contact you?
My email is Steve Hemphill, SteveHemphill, then the number one, Steve Hemphill 1 at me.com, just me.com.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I have been so blessed speaking. Every time I talk to you, I'm just encouraged, and my faith goes higher. And I'm a man definitely of faith, but when I talk to you, my faith goes even higher because to see the miracle working power of God actively working, not only setting people free, but getting people delivered, but
Right.
transforming people's lives. I mean, it's just been a blessing, and I thank you so much for coming on. And I want to
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, no problem. And we definitely got to get together here again soon. And I also want to thank the audience for listening right now. And I want you to know that no matter what situation you're going through, no matter what the devices of the enemy or what's happening in your life, God has an answer. And if you seek Him out, if you trust Him, and if you know the Word, God will move in your life, and He will set you free. Well, this has been James Alford with the Kingdom Authority Broadcast. I love you guys. God bless you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Kingdom Authority Podcast. Join us every week for powerful teachings, insightful interviews, and testimonies of God's power. To contact us for more info on books and articles from James Alford, make sure you go to jamesalford.org.